Hi, Washington Township. My name is Catherine Carey. I'm the Director of Assessment, Data Technology, Registration, and School Community Outreach. This is episode 3 of 20 for 20, where our superintendent will answer 20 questions from staff and community. Mr. Bollendorf, would you like to provide any updates to the community and staff before we begin?
Sure, Kathy, thank you. Hi, everybody. I've been getting a lot of positive feedback as it relates to these, so we want to keep doing them. If they continue to help in any way, we're happy that they are helpful to folks. Today is August 19th, Wednesday, so this video will probably come out by Friday. It's important for you to know the frame of which, the time frame of which these episodes are being recorded. So a couple of things. Yesterday, we learned that we had a glitch in our PowerSchool system, and some parents were able to access student schedules. That's great. We want to make sure that folks realize that they're still a work in progress. So you may have a schedule that is in fact accurate, but you may not. So it's important that you don't count on that particular schedule until their official release date, which is usually the week before school begins. So, we apologize for that glitch, but obviously they are still being worked on. Also, I have an update as it relates to Kids Choice. We had an extensive conversation with Joe Greer, the owner-operator of Kids Choice today, in terms of a variety of things that they're doing. So, depending on how things move along and the numbers of applications that they get, it's important to note that right now we are building for capacity in every one of our schools, because ideally, if you're a teacher at the high school, a staff member at the middle school, ideally you'd be able to bring your child to and from the school, in fact, that you work in. That would be our hope. But, based on capacity, if some building does not have a lot of need, there may be some consolidation of that effort, and students may have to be dropped off and picked up at another location within the school district. So we're working out those details now in an attempt to assist. Joe Greer did tell me that after some conversation, they've decided to once again to extend a discount to families who have multiple children that are in need of child care. I knew that there was some information out there that would lead folks to believe that that was not happening. Whether it was or was not, the fact is that that is not happening, and that it is happening, and they are providing discounts for folks that have multiple children in the program. So again, we're working very hard to provide what's needed, not only for our staff, but for folks in our community who can avail themselves to those child care options. So.
And Mr. Bollendorf, would this be correct that you may not know, or a parent may not know the cohort of their child, but they should still register for the number of days that they need in Kids Choice? Is that accurate?
Absolutely. For their purposes of staffing, they're trying to collect as many applications now so that they know what they're dealing with, which schools are going to be able to operate in, whether it's some of them or all of them. So the sooner people can sign up to be involved with Kids Choice, the better. You don't need to know which cohort you're in, which is probably one question that I know you have on the list, Kath, we can knock out right now. We hope by midweek next week, folks will be able to get information as to exactly which cohort they're in. Some of our buildings have already completed that process. We're waiting on other schools to complete it. And we're hopeful that by the beginning of next week, we'll have that data, and then we'll be able to push it out midweek to all of our families. So fingers crossed, midweek next week, we are hopeful that our families will know which cohort their children are being assigned to.
Thank you. Okay, so the first question. Many people are concerned with the ventilation systems in the district. Are the buildings being inspected by an engineering firm to ensure that the HVAC systems meet CDC and DOE standards?
The engineering firm, Remington and Vernick, and our engineer, Nina Hogan, had already done that process and is completed. She did a variety of things to test our facilities and our systems. First, for capacity, she wanted to determine what particular types of filters we had the capacity to provide in our HVAC systems. So HVAC systems have particularly manufacturally rated filters that go into those, and most of those HVAC systems are MERV rated filters, and each MERV filter has a different number rating. And the higher that number, the more dense the filter, the larger the filter may be, and the more particulates it has the ability to filter out of the air as air moves through the filtration system. Currently, right now in the district, we have primarily MERV 8 filters. Now, for greater particulation filtering, MERV 13, MERV 14, all the way up to MERV 17 would be ideal and recommended where possible. And that's what's clear. The CDC recommendations, the latest information we got from the NJEA clearly understands that if you don't have a filter that can handle a higher rated filter, then what you should be looking to at least do is to put the most highest rated filter into that system that you possibly can. And that's what we are doing. About 20 to 25% of our filters can handle as high as a MERV 13. And we are bringing MERV 13 filters in, and we'll be changing out filters with MERV 13 where possible. But the other 70 to 75%, I'm sorry, 75 to 80% of our buildings and their HVA systems can only handle as high as a MERV 8. At Orchard Valley Middle School and at Chestnut Ridge, the rooftop units there are equipped with HEPA filters, which is the highest standard. They're the only 2 buildings that have them, and they're in their rooftop units. The other HVA systems throughout the building are equipped with MERV 8, just like everywhere else. We are also looking at installing ultraviolet lights in our ventilation system, which will help perhaps kill bacteria and viruses as they travel through the air. We're looking at installing those or getting information on how we might be able to install those. Can the district afford to purchase them in large quantity? So that's something that's in process right now. But we do change our filters out per the manufacturer guarantee. All the filters have been changed out this summer or in the process of being changed out, and will be brand new filters in every single building before the start of the school year. Our HVA system has been turned fully on. It has been on since the beginning of this week and will continue to stay on. I have begun building visitations. I went to 5 buildings today, and my most specific concern is the function of the HVA system in those locations. I need to be apprised when we have an issue. We are making accommodations that if we have an issue with a particular HVAC unit in a particular room, that we can accommodate those kids to move them to a different location in the building. Obviously, the worst case scenario would be that if we were overwhelmed with HVAC issues and we had breakdowns in such a way, I would have to potentially consider at that point closing down a particular building and going to full remote instruction for that building until such time as the HVAC was fixed and we were able to once again return students and staff to those buildings. So we understand fully the importance of the HVAC system. They are all being manually overridden to ensure that at the very least 15% outside air is circulating, and the air exchanges in our rooms, which are at a minimum supposed to be at 3, are really far above that, ranging from 6 to 11 air changes in every single one of our rooms per the investigation and the report that was done by Nina Hogan. So I feel very confident that right now, we are trying to make sure that our HVAC is running at peak performance, that we would be providing the very highest filtration that we can with the units that we have. But there are limitations because we can't go beyond MERV 8 in most of the units that we have in the district. And so it's very important that people understand that we have a limitation to how much we can provide, and we're trying to provide the very best that we can.
Thank you. And you answered that so thoroughly. You answered the next question too, which I will just ask just in case you want to elaborate further, but I think you've already answered it. What kind of air filters are being used in buildings?
There you go.
Yeah. So, okay. So the next question after that, will disinfecting wipes be provided in every classroom so that teachers and staff can wipe down desks as needed and in between classes? And if so, does the district have enough?
Currently, we do. Every single classroom will have their own container of wipes and their own container of hand sanitizer. They will be replenished as needed throughout the course of the year. Our recommendation is that students will have the availability and teachers to wipe down desk between every class, and students then would have a clean environment to come in and sit in. So if as a student arrives and wants to clean their desk, those wipes are readily available for them, and they're able to do that. Yes, currently right now we have enough supplies on hand to last us into November. We are not waiting for them to run out to order more. We are in the process of gathering more supplies every day so that we have enough supplies on hand to last us for as long as we're in this situation, needing to be able to do these things to help make sure that our kids are safe and our staff is safe.
Thank you. And our staff wants to know, are employees required to use their own sick days if they are required to quarantine due to COVID exposure?
Uh, the CARES Act pretty much takes care of that for up to 80 hours. They would not be using their own sick time on the first go round. We are in the process of discussing with the WTEA, what would happen in the off chance that somebody, not only got infected once, but possibly twice, because CARES Act only is a limitation of up to 80 hours. And I'm confident that we're going to be able to work something out for them. I don't want to see people penalized or having to decide that they have to come to school even though that they may have been exposed or have been COVID positive because they don't have any sick days left and can't afford to, be in a situation where they're unable to work. So I think that it's incumbent upon us from a health and safety standpoint to work with our local unions to come to a reasonable solution to that problem. We're in the process of doing that right now.
Thank you. We'll add that to another episode when we have more information on that part. Will elementary students who receive in-person instruction be required to take their district-issued laptops or iPads back and forth to school?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, primarily, our in-district students who are coming and receiving live instruction are only doing so 2 days a week. They're going to need those laptops and iPads, the other three. Plus, it's important, I think, as they go home, they may have work that needs to be done at home. They might want to avail themselves to the supplemental instruction that's available in the remote side. And so they're going to need those devices in order to be able to do that. Plus, storing them in the buildings is really not advisable at this point in time. If they're absent on a particular day and their device is still there, now they can't get it in order to bring it home with them. It may be picked up and used by somebody else. I think it's really important that they retain those devices with them at all times and bring them to and from school.
Is there time built into the daily schedule for hand washing and sanitizing?
For our elementary kids, there is, because we want to teach them what's important. For our older children, our secondary age children, there'll be constant reminders for them to do that. Obviously, the availability of hand sanitizer in every single one of the rooms. So the expectation is that, during the course of the day, particularly if they use the restrooms, that they're going to be hand washing their hands as often as they can in those rooms where there's sinks. If they're like in a science lab, obviously at the conclusion of that class, the students are going to be instructed to wash their hands. So, that would be part and parcel. So it'll be a slight variation, constant reminding and mentioning and coaching at the secondary level with actual scheduled hand washing happening at the elementary level.
What will instruction look like at each level, the elementary and the secondary level? And how will lessons and assignments be organized and communicated to parents and students?
Well, I think you're referring to the remote model. So essentially, it's going to be very different than it was with the advent of the use of Schoology. That changes that dynamic dramatically. So we are in the process right now of actually recording an informational video by both our director of elementary and director of secondary education, Dr. Greger and and Gretchen Gerber, that will actually probably come out simultaneously with this video. That will really give some real details as to what that's going to look like, and I think that'll help parents understand, more specifically what they should expect and look for in the remote instruction model.
Thank you. How are you going to guarantee that students will follow social distancing in school?
Well, I've never, as hard as I tried, I've never been able to guarantee that the students will do any specific thing. They're students and they're learning, and that's why we do what we do. What I can guarantee is that we will have things in place to monitor, to ensure that they're being reminded consistently of the importance of social distancing and stepping in when need be to make that happen if that in fact occurs. In all of our buildings, there'll be signage. I did a walk through at Bunker Hill Middle School today where we're talking about, they have these cones that they're going to have a chain going down the middle, tape on the floor, reminders of 6 feet apart. Our staff are going to be out in those hallways, reminding students. And it's part of the reason why we're limiting the amount of time students spend in hallways. They're only really technically going to be in those hallways between classes 3 times a day. And then, of course, when they arrive and when they dismiss. So those visual reminders, verbal reminders, all day long, and it's never going to stop because they're kids. And our part as adults is to be there to coach them and remind them. And so the guarantee is that we'll continue to be very vigilant in that coaching attempt and reminder attempt to make sure our kids are doing what they need to do.
And would it be accurate to say that at any one time, there'll probably only be about 35% of the student population in a building?
Yeah, currently right now, based on our survey, and at last look, a little over 90% of our families have responded to the survey. Mm-hmm. And even based on that, the 9 or 10% of the folks who had not, we are considering them in our hybrid model. It's very possible that some percentage of those folks would prefer to be remote. But as it stands right now, about 71% of our families are going to avail themselves to live instruction. So if the cohorts are able to be divided evenly, and in some cases they may not be, but generally speaking, you're talking about 35% of your student population in a building at any one time. So that's going to reduce dramatically the numbers of kids that are there, the numbers of kids that are in classes. We've built for capacity in our classrooms, counting on at the most half of our students. So so most of our classrooms were built to handle about anywhere between 12 to 15 students, depending on the grade level. And it's more likely at this point in time that we're going to have probably, on average, maybe 10 kids per classroom. Some classes will have less, maybe another class may have a couple more from time to time. But generally speaking, looking at my walkthroughs and some of the cohort models I've seen, we're looking at, on average, about 10 kids per class.
So that should certainly help with social distancing.
Without question.
I see the plan is to have a reverse late bus to bring student athletes to afternoon games and practices. Will there still be a late bus to bring those student athletes home after practices?
Absolutely, as always.
Thank you. What would need to occur for an individual school to close?
Well, it's kind of important. I know we're going to start throwing a lot of information up for folks to see. I really encourage families and staff to visit our website. I know it's so easy to just ask questions sometimes, and we're always here to answer them, but there is so much information on our website that pertains to this. So one of the pieces is guidance from the CDC and the New Jersey Department of Health on this very issue, and there's an outline that's very specific as to what we would do and what would happen in the event something were to occur in our building. And I know Kathy's trying to pull it up now. This would be there it is. Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
This is directly from the NJDOH and the CDC. And you see they present a scenario and whether or not it would force closure. So in the first one, a confirmed case in school. So a teacher, a student is confirmed to have contracted COVID. The closure would be that school in this particular case would remain open and students and staff in close contact with the positive case are excluded for school for 14 days. So depending on what grade level that was, whether everybody was in one class or multiple classes, that would be the recommended outcome. It wouldn't really come down to closing school. They make a difference here. If you look at the second one where it says 2 or more cases in the same classroom, school can still remain open because part of this contact tracing is that close contact. So things may seem contained to that particular class, in which case you're going to quarantine the other folks in that class for up to 14 days. When it becomes hairy is when you may have 2 or more cases identified within 14 days that occur across multiple classrooms, if you look down, and a clear connection between cases or suspected confirmed cases cannot be easily identified. So now, we have 2 kids or 2 staff members or a kid and a staff member who never come in contact with one another, and they both come down with COVID. And so there then becomes a rapid concern for the potential for an outbreak, in which case in that environment, we would close that school down for 14 days and put all those kids and staff in the remote environment until we cleared that hurdle. So answers to those questions and the scenarios are all right there online. It's pretty scripted and straightforward. Nobody's going to be in a position where they're making individual decisions. And this guidance and this information is going to come directly to us from the Gloucester County Department of Health. And, they'll be directing us as we go through this because they'll be the warehouse of information to know whether or not one of our students tested positive, which we may not necessarily know if they weren't showing symptoms in school. It could have happened over the weekend, or when a child was out on remote and parent took them to the doctor and they come back with a COVID positive test. We're going to learn that information from the Department of Health. So there's as really important guidance for folks to avail themselves to. It's right on our website.
Thank you. And Joe, our assistants want to know, what will assistant schedules look like? Will they retain their contracted number of hours?
That's our goal. Our goal is to keep our folks working. AM and PM aides, for example, will be coming in both during the morning, during the hybrid schedule, and working collectively. Obviously, tasks may vary because this will provide us an opportunity to utilize those aides in a variety of ways, which I think is really critical. Aides that work longer hours and are providing more specific assistance to students would and should be involved to some level in the remote instruction model. So their day would continue just like the teacher's day continues in helping and providing assistance in that remote model. So as it stands right now, outside of the fact that your beginning and end time may vary because of the beginning and end times of school, our goal would be that our folks would continue to work the hours that they have contracted to work.
Thank you. What is the procedure for isolating an individual who is showing symptoms of COVID-19?
All of our classrooms, either in close proximity to the health office or in some cases adjacent to the health office, we have basic rooms where students who are suspected of COVID or staff would be brought and kept until such time as they would be able to be picked up by a family member and taken from the school. Every single one of our schools are being outfitted or have already been outfitted. We've had to change various rooms to do that, to provide that particular room, but every single school is being provided with that particular room.
Thank you. What is the schedule for cleaning common use areas?
It's basically during the 4-hour period, at least 2 times during the day. It may be more as needed. There's a rotation schedule for all of those things. Essentially, bathrooms would need to be shut down for probably at least 7 minutes. Because essentially what would happen is we would go in there with this electrostatic sprayer that sprays the disinfectant that doesn't need to be wiped down. That process only takes a couple of minutes, but it then takes 5 minutes for it to dry. So it's important that we have more than one bathroom available to staff and students in buildings, because at any one time during the course of the day, actually multiple times, bathrooms will need to shut down in order to go through that disinfecting process.
And if people want more information on that, Joe, we have that in our plan, correct?
We do. Appendix G of our plan, the 140-page plan, really has all of our practices related to our cleaning cycles and practices there.
Okay, thank you. Will teachers who have high risk factors and can't be in the building be responsible for students in the all remote cohort?
We're working that out on an individual basis. We're still awaiting on some teachers to respond to the survey. Once we have those responses and we know what we're dealing with, obviously we're going to look for ways to perhaps utilize those staff in creative ways, and obviously applying their abilities in the remote environment would be one of those ways. So we will be obviously reaching out to those staff members and working out those details at a later date.
Thank you. What precautions are being taken to protect employees in district buildings such as central, transportation, etc.?
The same as every other building. There's no difference. Social distancing, the wearing a face mask in reception areas, the utilization of plexiglass to protect folks from visitors, even if there are other staff members coming into their workspace. An ongoing process of routine cleaning and disinfecting in those buildings throughout the course of the day.
Has there been any discussion regarding a reduction in school taxes for property owners this year due to the shutdown?
Well, currently right now, our expenditures haven't been reduced as a result of this, particularly since it is our plan to open our schools in our community. So our staff is going to be fully working. But more importantly, we've had to shift a lot of budgeted dollars around in order to acquire the materials that we've needed in the way of PPE and disinfectant, things of that nature. And so, there's been no change in expenditure. So unless there's, a complete shutdown of any sort, similar to what we've had in the spring, I don't see a reduction in taxes as it relates to that at this moment in time.
If a child wakes up with a bellyache, the sniffles, or is just not feeling well, and we have to call them out of school, what will happen next? Will they automatically have to quarantine or be tested for COVID, even if it's not COVID symptoms?
Now, this is the great dilemma, right? Because so many things are, that may not be actual COVID could seem like that they are COVID. The reality of it is that you have to check your child's symptoms against the symptom checker that we've provided in the guidance. And Kathy, if you can pull it up. And so this is going to be provided to our parents, particularly as we put together the pledge that we're asking our parents to do this each and every morning. You're going to check your child for a fever and make sure that they don't have a cough, nasal congestion, a sore throat, shortness of breath, diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, fatigue, headache, new loss or taste of smell, poor feeding or poor appetite, or some other things that fall into that. And if a parent sincerely suspects that their child may have contracted COVID and is, experiencing any or all of these symptoms, they're going to move through this and make the appropriate determination. And if you can go to the next chart, so what happens if I have symptoms? And so here's the COVID return to flow chart. And let's just focus our attention to the very top box on the right. Individuals who have symptoms of COVID and, first one, has tested positive or has not tested positive, you go to now to that right, and it tells you what it is that you need to do. That student should stay home and away from others for at least 10 days and since their symptoms first appeared, and that they have no fever for at least 24 hours, one full day without medicine that reduces fever, and that symptoms have improved. So, we're talking about, the safety of others involved and to err on the side of caution. If you legitimately feel that your child has symptoms that are related to the symptom checker that we provided, then you should keep that child home for at least 10 days from the time that they started first experiencing those symptoms.
Okay, thank you.
And then what's important to add too, that they just don't stop, they just then fall into the remote instruction mode and they'll continue their instruction with their teacher like they would the other 3 days that they don't go in school. So over a 10-day period, at the most, the student's only going to miss 4 days of in-person instruction. They're going to, have an additional 4 days plus the other 3, and not even counting weekends. So at the most, they're going to lose 4 days of instruction. It's important to consider that, and they stay in the remote environment.
Of in-person instruction, but they can still avail themselves to the remote instruction. So it would just be the in-person portion they'd be missing. Okay.
That's right.
And this last question, Joe, you've already actually answered in another question, but let me ask it anyway in case you want to elaborate. How many kids will there be in a classroom?
Oh, I did answer it, but I'll repeat it. So right now in my walkthroughs and looking at some of the schools that particularly have completed their cohort information, some classes have, 8, 9 kids in it. Other classes have 11 or 12. And so, on average of 10. And we built for capacity, depending on the grade level, for 12 to 15 students. And right now, with about 70%, 71% of our families indicating for live instruction, it doesn't appear that we're going to really exceed the average of about 10 kids per classroom, unless students who initially elect remote choose to want to try to come back to school, and obviously that average could go up. But currently, right now, it's about 10 students per class.
And for anyone electing to change their instructional preference at this point, those requests need to be put in writing to the building principal. That would be correct?
That is correct. And depending on where the student is, would pretty much dictate the length of time it may take to make that change. So obviously, if the student is in school receiving live instruction and a parent decides they want to switch them to remote, that's a far easier switch. If they want to switch from remote instruction back into the live instruction, that may take more time in planning and logistics, because particularly if they need transportation. So we ask our parents to be patient and to give us up to as much as 2 weeks to make that transition happen. But where possible, we'll make it as quickly as we can.
Okay, thank you. And Joe, that was our 20 questions. So I just want to remind all staff and families that if they want to submit more questions, we're checking our COVID-19 info at WTPS.org email all the time. I'm already working on episode 4 questions. So I do encourage everyone to submit any of their questions or concerns so that we can take a look at them. But before we close, Joe, do you have any closing remarks?
No, I just want to thank, there's been a lot of people out there that, really understand, what the district is going through and the stress that's related to these decisions. At the end of the day, we're just really trying to do what's best for everybody, which is why we're offering choice to our families to choose remote or choose live instruction. There's a lot of our kids that they really need to be in school. And, I've gotten a lot of positive feedback from staff who are anxious to see their kids. Many of them are concerned about moving into a remote instruction mode right from the jump without ever having met their children. And that's a grave concern for some of our staff members. I just want to express my thanks for the amount of support and empathy and understanding that people have expressed, and to just kind of iterate to this community, how much we care about what it is that we do, and how we are desperately trying to get this right. And there's a lot of folks working very hard to do what's right for our kids and for our staff. And I just appreciate the many well wishes that we received. And thank you. It's much appreciated.